Hey, Michael.
Hey.
I'm a gay man, and I just wanted to say that I completely agree with you on this. This is one of those times when, I'm kind of ashamed that my own people fight like this, because they don't seem to understand that what they're doing is going to cause more harm than it does good. When you force the population to conform to radical standards that are, there are plenty of places that these people could go get a insemination.
Right, and as our previous caller,
why are they fighting for this?
Our previous caller made clear, they had 3 previous children from another medical care provider.
Yeah, I'm sorry to associate myself with people that are that crazy.
And it's about a counselor who was a devout Christian who didn't want to take a lesbian crack addict as a patient. So, of course, that's a lawsuit. Should it be? This involves a counselor named Marcia Walden, who was working as a counselor, a psychological counselor for the Centers for Disease Control. And here's what happened. She is a devout Christian, well known, and she also believes, as a devout Christian, that it is immoral to engage in same-sex relationships. So all of a sudden, at her office, a lady named Jane comes in, a prospective client, and says, hey, I'm having trouble with my girlfriend, and I'm a lesbian, and rather than misleading her, Marcia immediately decided to tell Jane about her religious conflict, indicating that it would be unfair for her, Jane, if she were to serve as her counselor. But she remained helpful and offered to refer Jane to another counselor named Ken Cook. 10 minutes later, this lesbian client goes and starts seeing this other counselor. Everything's fine. Everything's happy. This is all described in a column today by Mike S. Adams at townhall.com. And all of a sudden, later the day, Jane was feeling angry. Why is she feeling angry? Because she came in to see a counselor, and the counselor said, you know what, I'm a Christian, and we don't sanction, I don't sanction same-sex relationships. So she complained that this lady who didn't even agree to counsel her, she just said, look, I'm the wrong person to handle your situation. This lady was guilty of homophobia. So Jane approached her supervisors, and she was told by her supervisors, next time, why don't you just lie and tell them that make up an excuse about why you can't take. And she said, no, it's also against my religious beliefs to lie. I happen to believe in telling the truth. And in any event, this brought in an employee relations specialist named Jacqueline Byram, who implied that it was wrong for Ms. Walden to have even mentioned her religious objections to homosexuality. Instead, she should just tell the prospective homosexual client that she was not experienced with relationship counseling.
It's a big drama.
Okay, and Walden said, but that's not true. I am experienced with relationship counseling, and the reason okay, so in any event, she was fired. She was fired from her job for refusing to see a lesbian client. And you don't think there's a certain amount of intolerance and persecution going on here? Does the modern era, does justice and tolerance and kindness require that people drop any objection to out-of-wedlock relationships, out-of-wedlock childbearing, to people living together outside of wedlock, and to homosexuality? Is that what we've come to in the United States of America? That's one of the questions that is raised by the Supreme Court case that was decided unanimously yesterday in California. The people of California will decide the issue of gay marriage when it comes up on the ballot. The basis for that vote will be to overturn a Supreme Court decision, an absurd Supreme Court decision, that one not unanimous, that one was 4-3, that discovered, oh, look at this, here we go, we see the framers of the state constitution in California secretly meant to force the state to recognize same-sex relationships. It will simply say, it will not ban same-sex relationships. You can have any relationships you want. What it will say is that marriage in the state of California will be between one man and one woman. Does that represent an outrageous act of hatred? No, the outrageous acts of hatred are coming from the other side. When they say to two dedicated physicians, wait a minute, you don't want to perform in utero fertilization, insemination with a lesbian couple? Well, you're going to have to. Otherwise, leave the practice of medicine. Just great, particularly at a time when many, many areas in this country are suffering from doctor shortages, particularly for OBGYNs who are so victimized by the ridiculous rates of malpractice insurance.
Let me ask you this. What if there was a fundamentalist doctor who wouldn't do an organ transplantation or wouldn't transfuse blood because he thought he read in some, his reading of the Bible, mandates that there shouldn't be such human intervention.
Well, again, there's a difference between an emergency surgery or an emergency procedure where there is no question at all that medical ethics require that if someone comes into you on an emergency basis, you got to help that person, even if that person's an illegal immigrant. And that's standard medical ethics. You don't let somebody die. You don't let somebody get hurt. You don't let somebody suffer. But what we're talking about here is an elective procedure. Okay, so if you're talking about somebody who says, I have some kind of moral objection to a heart transplant, you go see somebody else, like Dr. Bill Frist, the former senator from Tennessee, who performs heart transplants. No problem. Why not?
Well, all right, let me ask you this. What about the cases where there's a fundamentalist family that is not accepting modern health care for a dying child? And they have a very strong religious belief and conviction. How did you come down on that? And courts have forced those parents to treat those kids.
Actually, I haven't talked about those issues on the air because I think they're very, very complicated and depends on the individual. If the life of the child is at stake, I do think there is a societal obligation to protect the child.
So all of a sudden religious beliefs are out the window.
No, religious beliefs are not absolute. And as a matter of fact, given the fact that we have civil rights laws, somebody could say I'm a follower of so-called Pastor Richard Butler, who's the Aryan Nations guy, may he rot, in Hayden Lake, Idaho, who taught that black people and Jewish people were inferior. And I think it's perfectly legitimate to say that there are some religious beliefs that we don't tolerate. I think it was wrong. For instance, the courts have decided that if you claim that you have a religious obligation to eat peyote, I think that some courts have said that goes. But look, in other words, to say that a religious belief trumps every social norm doesn't work. But I don't think that the sanction and support for homosexuality should be our new social norm.
When a religious belief jives with your beliefs, that's when you're wholeheartedly in support of them and opposed to this decision because it aligns very tightly.
I'm all in favor of people being allowed within reason, as long as they are not doing damage to the public at large, to practice their religion. There's no evidence at all that these doctors damaged anyone. They may have hurt the feelings of some of their patients. Now we're on the Michael Medved Show. I do not see any efforts by conservatives or people of faith to take away the rights of gay people or of secularists or of atheists to express themselves. They get expressed all the time. But what you do see, regularly, is self-righteous, left-wing, secular extremists trying to take away and to criticize any expressions of a religious point of view in many, many settings. Basically anywhere except church.